Hello, leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love and Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host for this podcast, having the pleasure to be joined today by Dr. Shahin Gharakhanian, a physician and pharmaceutical executive with expertise in pharmaceutical medicine, leadership, management, and operational experience both in the US and in Europe. Shahin is specialized in HIV medicine and infectious diseases, has practiced clinical medicine for over 20 years in AP-HP hospitals in Paris, France, before joining the pharmaceutical industry in 1991, progressing to vice president of Vertex Pharmaceuticals with roles in three main areas: clinical development, medical affairs, and strategic leadership, including being member in the Corporate Operating Council. Overall, within the industry, Shahin has held positions ranging from general manager of a contracting research organization to program executive, leading product development, regulatory approval, and launches in multiple therapeutic areas across the world. Shahin has also founded, built, organized full functional departments and units for biotech companies and hospitals, as well as two LCCs as an entrepreneur. He is a member of several international societies, and his passion is really patient-focused programs for drug and vaccine development, approval, and launch. Shahin, it's such an honor to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me in the program, Najib.
I would love first to hear your personal story from being a clinician in France to the pharma industry and now back with several hats, including being a clinician in infectious diseases during the pandemic, entrepreneur, consultant, and many different several roles that you play today. What's in between the lines of your inspiring careers?
Naji, I can say that probably the guiding line, the red line, as you know, there's a expression in French, or the guiding light, if you like that expression, has been, I consider myself as somebody who is in the helping professions. You know, whether as a medical doctor, this was really my initial and more the core value. And some of my colleagues, which I totally respect, they choose the medical profession, for example, because it is scientifically very appealing. They are eminent researchers and they go through many phases of their lives discovering it. I loved and still love seeing patients. I love the contact, the human contact, the fact of making a difference in one person's life. I think it's a huge accomplishment. I know there are wonderful people who run philanthropic organizations, and through their money and through their efforts, they help hundreds and thousands. I still think that when you make a difference in one person's life and that person remembers you, believe it or not, I've stopped practicing for a decade, and some of my patients still write and ask and tell me, you know, how they are doing and how I am doing. So this has been the guiding line. At one point in my career, I met a gentleman called Professor Marc Gentilini. Maybe the name doesn't resound to you. He is alive and doing well. A more senior gentleman, a member of the French Academy of Medicine. He is a specialist in tropical medicine. And you know, there are two schools in tropical medicine: the British and the French, because of the historical past. They still have that knowledge. And he was the person who really told me, you know, are you interested in epidemiology? Are you interested? Computers were coming. Are you interested in applications of the computer science to medicine? And he had a phrase telling me, you know, there are people who work with their stethoscope, and there are people, by people he meant physicians. There are physicians who work with their stethoscope, and there are physicians who work with their pen and their computer and their knowledge. So he suddenly opened an area of thinking that, you know, sure, you can. We are trained to be at the bedside or to do research, but that's not the only way. And that actually took me to pharma. And because you asked me what was the journey, the as you mentioned in my biography, I was formed essentially in France. French medicine is excellent, and but I have long years of continuing education at Harvard, where the teachers are just extraordinary from my viewpoint. But from a pharmaceutical base, science and medicine, I am very much I learned a trade at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and it's also how serendipity and chance can influence your life. I got a phone call, and somebody was looking for an MD for Vertex, and I at that point in time, the company was totally unknown. In fact, the person told me, "You don't know them, the name will not speak to you." I said, "Well, tell me who they are." And he said, "Vertex. It's a company in US called Vertex." And I said, "Is it the Vertex of the book?" So there's a book about Vertex called "In Search of the $2 billion Molecule" by a journalist of New York Times, I believe, and was in fact a bestseller. And I was in France, probably one of the 3 persons in the country who had read the book. And I told her, "Don't move. I'm coming over." And I discovered Dr. Joshua Boger, the co-founder, an incredibly talented group of professionals, and took me and I learned a lot and launched 2 drugs there with that wonderful team. So I would say some of the journey and who I am was decision making. You apply to medical school, right? You make the decision of applying for something and going through, but a lot of it, whether it was HIV, meeting the people who discovered HIV and later on got the Nobel Prize of Medicine, or meeting Vertex, were all chance. And it makes you think that how much are you really in control of your destiny? You might be, you might not be. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a big debate, right? Like, is
Exactly.
it really chance? Is it a chance that you practically created through your intention and where you want to go? So I love your humility at stating it's chance and serendipity and other things. And I also loved how you said helping professions. I really think it's kind of an underlining that you're talking about. This is what you wanted. So I'm intrigued. Did you always wanted to become a physician? Was it something since your childhood that you
Yes,
wanted
I
to
think
be?
I was. It came to me. Perhaps we had in our family a family physician who was a wonderful man, and the type you see in movies. Coming to your house. At that time, physicians used to make house calls. You're too young, maybe, to remember. But these people became friends of the family, in fact. And I was very much inspired by his conduct, the way he was. And in fact, I went to see him to get advice on my choice. And I perhaps there were, unlike many families, we did not have any physician in the family, so there was nobody. My parents were not in the medical profession, so there was nobody close I could get inspiration from. I don't remember seeing a lot of movies or TV series. I think it was probably this one person that sort of inspired me.
You talked about HIV, and you've been part of this first public health crisis through HIV. And you were, I think, clinician, but then you also were in pharma during that time. So I'm
Yes,
interested, I would love to hear your thoughts about really your learning from that time
uh,
as a leader in both sides, as a clinician and in the pharma.
absolutely. Um, in the as you remember, in the mid 80s, the Center for Disease Control reported several cases of a strange disease in young men in San Francisco. In Paris, France, a young physician, Dr. Willy Rosenbaum, was called, talk about chance, right? Was called from the emergency room saying that there was a young steward from a major airline flying between New York and Paris who was very ill. And they performed a bronchoscopic lavage on him, and they had discovered pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which is extraordinarily rare in normal times. You can see it only in people who undergo transplantation. Dr. Rosenbaum was one of the few people in Paris reading the journal of the CDC called MMWR, Mortality Morbidity Weekly Reports. And suddenly the light bulb came on. He rushed to the emergency room and he told them, this is the disease that the CDC has just described. And from there started the incredible adventure where he took the lymph node from this patient to the Institut Pasteur in Paris, and Professors Montagnier, Barré-Sinoussi, and their teams discovered HIV. I met Willy in summer of '85. He looked at me and he told me I was looking for a fellowship. He said, you know, if you're looking for an ordinary fellowship, you don't come here. If you're looking for something extraordinary in the true sense of the word, you can start tomorrow morning. He looked at me in the, imagine this is August of 1985, where very few people were talking about this disease. He looked at me in the eyes and said, this is the biggest public health crisis of modern times. So with that, I started working with HIV. And to answer your question, Naji, directly, two things. One will interest you because I understand it's the thematic of your podcast. You talk about love. It is the love of patients and the love you get from patients. Was an extraordinary lesson of humility to me as a young man who was not prepared, a young physician who was not prepared to see a lot of people in his age range die, which HIV was at the beginning 100% mortality rate. But it was also a lesson in leadership in people who pushed away the discriminations, the stigmatizing, who said, you know, you can be from Haiti, you can be gay, etc. It doesn't make a difference. We are supposed to treat people, and pushed away all of those taboos to show leadership and take charge of people. And I think those were things which I sort of were totally inspirational. And I learned how, and then of course there were leaders among patient advocacy groups. There were leaders among doctors in hospitals, among the nursing staff, very important. I think the women played a major role, and in society. And that was a fantastic lesson for me that later on inspired me a lot.
Those are really super powerful learning in leadership. Thanks for sharing, Shahin.
Shapes you, yeah, a lot.
Well, it's not over, right? HIV, we're way better now.
No, we are way better. Thank you to the pharmaceutical industry, who produced over 30 or probably the count is higher, 32, maybe drugs, and the formidable collaboration between academia, industry, public health authorities. I would have liked to see this more during the COVID era. People started setting up barriers again, and this was a big deal in those times. And of course, later on in Africa, philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation, different funds, everything came together to beat this incredible pandemic.
So that was my follow-up question. Actually, did you feel we learned from this HIV era going through COVID? And I'm interested also, you bring a very important point, which is really the stigma, diversity, include like it touches really very social issues. Unfortunately, we saw resurface again in COVID, even though it was not a particular gender, race, or nationality, whatever we
Exactly.
want, right? So I'm intrigued. Like, were you frustrated how we
Yes
dealt
and
with
no.
COVID? Or
The no part is that we didn't see that sort of international collaboration. Every country started saying, "I'm doing." Even the Europeans were supposed to have sort of a more uniform approach. And of course, you remember, if you're coming from this country, you're coming from that country, you need to test and you need not to test. And everybody started. I won't go into ugly incidents like the people fighting over masks in international airports and things like that. When there was a mask shortage, everybody was fighting over that. What did carry over was, I believe, I can cite. I remembered data I saw from Dr. Tony Fauci here, who said that roughly 50% of people engaged in COVID care and research are from the HIV background. So they brought, and we brought, all of that more scientific knowledge on resistance, on mutations, on variants, etc. The public health also knowledge. So yes and no. Yes, in the terms that if the world mobilized because the experts were from that background. No, we would have liked to see more empathy, more solidarity between the countries, rather than people saying, I'm shutting down and don't come and see me, and if you're coming from this country or that country, then you're not really welcome, which is not exactly, was not at all helpful, in fighting the epidemic.
so do you feel, I have to ask you this question, I feel we're seeing that pandemic, most probably experts like yourself are saying they will come at a faster pace potentially in the future. What are your thoughts about our readiness as a human beings, as humanity towards this?
Naji, if you had asked me the same question a year or 14 months ago or 18 months ago, I try to look at this scientifically and not with emotion. I would have been probably, I would have sort of politely brushed away. But I have seen during this past 18 months numerous publications, and I can provide that to your auditors and to people who listen to your programs, in major journals such as Science, etc., very well thought through experiments explaining how viral diseases and infectious diseases in general will spread because of the ecological disequilibrium that we currently have. Let me give your auditors a relatively simple scenario that I witnessed through the reporting of a journalist. There has been massive forest cleaning and cutting down of trees in the Congo, Congolese Republic. Areas which have been cleaned out were the sanctuary of a certain type of monkey. The monkeys were therefore had no dwelling anymore, started going into villages and because they were, I think one can put oneself in their situation. Their homes were destroyed. They go into villages. You shouldn't expect them to be very friendly, and by biting, especially children, they have transmitted viral diseases to these children. So it's a scary scenario, but it's this is from last year. Was reported by news reporters, not scientists, news reporters. So it's just one of the examples of how we are man is facilitating. And again, there is a mounting amount of evidence in this direction. Hence, you see that certain organizations or startups are being created to be able to respond by producing antivirals more quickly and things like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as you're saying, it's another. It shows us again this system and system functioning and the system dynamics between things, right? Like it's an interconnected web, even though we always wanted to think about it like as we human being, and unfortunately some would think even some of us are better than others as human beings, are like on the top of the the other species, but unfortunately we are an interconnected web, and it's a great reminder. It's such a great example.
Totally. And air travel interconnects us, and we saw how efficiently during the COVID era, air travel was a vehicle of transmission. In fact, the CDC in Atlanta, one of the data pieces that they look when there is an international outbreak, they look at air connections between cities, because you can almost predict what will happen and where it will happen.
There was a great article on COVID actually, with the first how flights actually outspread everything.
Exactly.
You talked, Shahin, about startups, and I know you've been heavily involved in the different biotech ventures at different stages and development. I'm intrigued now more from this lens. What would be your advices for biotech companies starting up? You've been involved in companies starting, building, growing, scaling, and you've been helping and consulting also some of the smaller biotechs and larger ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts, if you have one or two advice for those who are building up.
The first thing I would say is, if you're motivational, your motivation is uniquely to make money. Very sophisticated financial people have explained to me that going into biotech business is probably not the best route. You can very quickly make money in other areas of economic activity in a shorter period of time, rather than go into a business where 10 years later you might or you might not, make a lot of money. So great leaders, which I have observed, like Joshua Boger or Henry Thiermier, or people who have been at the helm of large companies, even the founder of Merck, had a famous saying doing well by doing good. They have been consistently motivated by something which is above and beyond. Then I would say, when you're leading a biotech company, there are three facets you have to take into consideration. One is being a leader, where you need to inspire, you need to mobilize, you make people work long hours, you have to be able to get them the inspiration they need. You have to be a good administrator, and you have to be a great manager. These are three distinct qualities. And then the question is, what is the right mix? You can take 30%, 30%, but some companies need 70% of management and just a little of the others. Some need at various times. Also, the needs change. Sometimes at one point you need to be a great administrator because you have maybe things going on in that field which are very important. At the end of the day, you do need. It's such a tough area where you need a lot of inspirational leadership by somebody who can just pull you, because it's look at all these brave CEOs trying to raise money right now in the middle of an economic crisis in Europe, a war. I mean, I really have a lot of admiration. You see them, they tell you they've done like 40 pitches in 1 month, or 30. They go to bio, they meet, I don't know, 120 meetings in 5 days. You know, it's you have to have a lot of stamina.
I would love now to give you a word
Sure.
and get your reaction to it. I know you love this game.
If I have a blank, everybody will excuse me.
So the first word is leadership.
On anticipation.
What about innovation?
Daring.
Can you say a little bit more about it? I love this definition.
You have to have the guts to come out of your comfort zone, and to be beaten on the head by a stick because what you're saying or what you're trying to achieve nobody else has done. I think without getting into any cliche, but from public and personal information, I think the team at Moderna was able to innovate, because believe me, you know, the doors did not open at the first day. So so you have to dare. You have to dare.
The third one is Boston Biotech Summit.
Collaboration, bridge.
I'd love for you to pitch briefly to our audience, because it's one of those great summits where you're bridging Paris and Boston.
Naji, I think thanks to many people around the world, a number of medical problems have been resolved with new drugs, new innovation, vaccines, monoclonal antibodies, new devices, everything you want. Now we are at a core of remaining problems. If I may, I can compare hepatitis C and hepatitis B, which is currently the target. Hepatitis C is an easier disease in many ways. The target, finding the drugs was difficult, but Hep B, because it integrates, it is an integrated virus, it's much more difficult. Curing HIV is very difficult. Some cancers we have progress, but other cancers are very tough to cure. And finally, if you take rare diseases of children, some of them there are breakthroughs, but others remain. Psychiatric disease, which is a big unmet medical need, finding better treatments for tuberculosis, #1 infection in the world. It's a shame on humanity that, you know, we are in 2022. TB is still out there. Getting these problems solved will need know-how from everywhere. No company, not even the big ones, they know this, by the way. The Pfizers and the GSKs and the Sanofis, they know this. But I think even if you have a smaller biotech, you need to understand that you cannot do it alone. This is the idea behind the summit, is to build bridges. Ours is across the Atlantic, but you can imagine all sorts of bridges between people, between labs, and if we try to bring people together in a small scale meeting, we respect the big meetings, they're essential, but ours is an artisans meeting, we call it, and so they can talk to each other, and from there can come synergies, because we are firm believers. Now, I know we are swimming against the tide when you hear countries shutting down and telling, you know, stay out, I'm going to do my own thing, you know. It's not always easy, but we've been doing this for 6 years, and I think we have data now showing that there are projects that sparked up. So your answer is on our website. It's the bridges you can see on our website, which is symbolizes collaboration, really.
Yeah, and even if it's against, tide and current, this is crucial. Collaboration is crucial, and we saw like the success we can get from.
Absolutely.
The last word is spread love in organizations.
I like your applying the word love in a corporate setting is not an easy task, but there is a word in English which I like very much, which is empathy, which is another way of saying love. And I also want to remind your auditors, and I can look up the exact references, but there was a former Boston scholar who's now retired, who has a whole theory around the big social movements, and that their foundation is a sudden burst of love. He has written several books. I can try to find the references for you, but I hope we are entering an era where our leaders, whether they're political or corporate, will understand that their teams have evolved. The population has evolved, and the more the world is now full of people like you, Naji, which are highly educated, highly motivated, come from different backgrounds, are very autonomous in their thinking, and leading people of this phenotype is very different from the past. So you need to have that empathy built into your leadership model, I believe. But of course, I'm sure it's a big debate in management schools.
Yeah, well, first I would love all your reference, and we'll make sure we'll have them for our audience on your page. And yeah, obviously this is something that have been studied. It's not always called love, genuine care, servant leadership, psychological safety, empathy, as you said, compassion. Like there's hundreds of words, and really what we're trying to bring here is incredible leaders, thinkers like you, who actually have done it and believe in it, because we would never do enough to again emphasize exactly what you said. Any final word of wisdom, Shahin, for healthcare leaders around the world?
Probably a plea to pay more attention to this interface between health and our environment. A plea that in order to be able to contribute to healthcare, it is better to have peace than war. War is extremely costly in many ways, human, but also finance. It's a huge. I'm very worried that conflicts across the world will drain countries' energies, and you have to. I mean, you cannot print money indefinitely. You need to take from somewhere to give to somewhere else. It's just as basic as that. But taking this interface between our natural environment and our health seems to be rising really to the top of the agenda. I mean, just looking at from HIV to COVID to monkeypox, with Ebola, Zika in the middle, coming and going. I hope the COVID crisis will make everybody think twice, because here you have a disease where everything stopped. Cities emptied, everything stopped, life stopped, and we probably cannot have another one of these crises. It will be very tough to manage. So that also calls for more empathy and love, probably.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful Please, Shahin, thanks for sharing this. And thank you again for being with me today.
Thank you, Naji, for having me on this program. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organizations podcast. Subscribe and connect with us on SpreadLoveIO.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Most importantly, spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.